Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to give a presentation today. I'm really honored by this invitation and also by your participation. We will talk today about open science and the future of scholarly communication. In more specific terms, about the presence of the internet trackers, algorithmic persuasion, robotic process automation in scholarly communication. I am Tiberius Ignat, Director of Scientific Knowledge Services, a small company that works with research organizations and publishers to disseminate trustful knowledge and to make the transition to open science. In 2015, we started a series of events in collaboration with UCL and LIBER, which continues to be a forum for networking and practical implementations of open science. The aim of my presentation is to raise questions and to have them discussed. I promise I will answer even after the event if these questions are passed to me, and I'm looking forward to meet you in the Q&A session, where please feel invited to formulate questions in your own language. The structure of this presentation is a few words about us, our contributions to open science very briefly. I will start this part because it's important to position scientific knowledge services in what drives our company to support open science with what we call such dedication, what we think it's quite dedication. And then I will continue with some remarks about science and open science. And finally, I'll get to the point, the new technologies and the future, their presence in the future of the scholarly communication. Our contributions to open science. This is a series of humble elements, but we are dedicated to them. And we believe that such small contributions are needed to make the transition happen. In a short illustration, this is how our company is active in open science. In its cultural part, we'll help organizations creating impactful events. For the open science movement, we develop our series that I mentioned before, together with UCL and the European League of Research Universities. And in infrastructure, we created a prototype for citizen science single point of contact. We do implementations for it, but the prototype is free to access. And then we are also doing research, the kind of research that I'm going to talk to you today. Now that the introductions have been made, let's continue our presentation about the effect and internet trackers, algorithmic persuasion, and robotic process automation in scholarly communication. Scholarly communication, which is an important element of open science. I'm sure each of you has a definition of science. For me, science represents the quest to find the truth, the freedom to explore the bizarre, and the right to communicate inconvenient findings. But have we ever found the truth? Do we have any chance to find the truth after all? We have no answer for this. Although we found the way to describe the universe using mathematics as a language for which triangles, circles, other geometric figures are the letters, we are simply running behind the truth. Therefore, researchers developed an art of compromise, a state of tolerance for them to continue exploring the most bizarre corners of nature and society, and to establish findings, no matter how hard it is to accept them. And that solution was to agree on what they trust. Researchers don't claim they find the ultimate understanding of a phenomenon. They simply agree on what to trust once they build some new evidence. In that sense, science is a humble activity. We should remain humble and learn to accept that we may not find the truth. With that in mind, we need to build trust in research. But let's admit, our society is not designed to grant trust. No reasonable person expects to obtain trust just by asking for it. On the contrary, individuals and organizations need to work hard and to acquire the confidence of others. Transparency proved to be a good way to build that trust. In a nutshell, science is our quest for truth, which we'll probably never find. But transparency and open disclosures, hence open science, could help researchers obtaining the public support to explore the bizarre, to nurture and attract generations of curious minds, and to tell what is sometimes inconvenient for many to hear. Scientists, researchers should save no effort for continuing to build that trust between them and the rest of society. Once again, here it is, open science. Give another piece of attention to that line. Generations of curious minds. Because curiosity is at the heart of research and is probably one of the most important elements for society, for research funders. This is something that they need to stimulate. And it is not only about stimulating curiosity for those already in the systems, researchers, but it's also about nurturing new generations of curious minds to be attracted in this system. Concepts like algorithmic persuasion influence not only what we read, but also how we start to think. What are we curious about? For research systems, persuasion also influences how researchers apply for grants, what collaborations they think of. It also influences the funders and what kind of competitions to launch, what research field to support, and what kind of collaborations to encourage. Algorithmic persuasion could also influence funders in what kind of research infrastructure to invest in. So I argue that algorithmic persuasion works against curiosity and not on its support. Therefore, when we discuss about technologies, platforms, it is important to understand the context of lending for them. And they will land on a trend of opening the inner parts of research to public scrutiny, to reuse and to public use. So it's clear for me that we need to make sure that when we use and you reuse research, publications, datasets, methods, software, this is done in the highest ethical standards and for the benefit of our society. It is also important to maintain curiosity of researchers with or without technologies in this new brave world of open science. So I hope my short notes regarding science and open science shed a proper light on the architecture in which modern technologies will land. It's not time to concentrate on open science now, but I hope you are encouraged to raise questions in the Q&A. What I'm trying to say with this presentation is that we need to control this lending of these technologies to make sure we operate correctly the light guns from the control tower. It's not going to be on ordinary lending, especially on the open science landscape. And I'm sure some passengers understand technologies should be checked carefully before they get a visa or are refused to entry. But if we don't pay the right attention and we are not anticipative enough, these new technologies will land, will melt into the scholarly communication. They will do this in the gaze. It will be then hard, if not impossible, to recognize them after they melt. I would like to repeat, because it's important for the rest of the presentation. Science is, in my view, our quest for truth, which we'll probably never find, but transparency and open disclosures could help researchers obtain the public support to explore the bizarre, to nurture and attract generations of curious minds, and to tell what sometimes is inconvenient for many of us. But that means open science is suited for a world that on its turn is ethically governed and is clear of malicious intents. Manipulation, tracking, persuasion, and open science are not good fellows. They are not working well together. Indicating the hot topics, doing only this could narrow researchers' curiosity. Curiosity is at the heart of research. The humankind effort should go into broadening this curiosity, turning the biggest stone to explore the unknown, not the opposite. Shedding light only on what is hot and indicating to researchers in which field they should be curious. Because if they are curious in that field, they will have a chance for a better grant. This is not going to stimulate broad curiosity. Tell me how many researchers and how many organizations will resist this temptation of doing research in topic A or B just because their chances to get a grant is bigger. How is that kind of approach going to shape their dreams, their biggest and most independent curiosity, in a positive or negative way? Are we supposed to find solutions to the problems just by looking in mass in the same direction? I don't think so. There is wisdom from the past that could guide us. Unfortunately, we are not always good to learn from the past. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them, said Albert Einstein. Indeed, those algorithms that could identify research patterns and change the odds for us to publish more, to publish quicker, to get easier to research funds. They are working on a system and on a machine learning program that are based on how we created our problems. They are not good to offer new thinking for solving the problems in a different way, in a feasible and sustainable way. So watch out for the landing of these algorithms in scholarly communication. Understand correctly what they offer. Don't simply listen to what is written in their PowerPoints. Pablo Picasso stated in 1968, computers are useless. They can only give you answers. Don't take me as an advocate against computer software, algorithms, or AI. I'm not. I do support their development, but in a sane way. The key is sane, like insane integration. I don't feel we discussed enough the ethics, the real possibilities, not the utopic presentations, and I don't feel we dedicated enough effort to understand and control their effect in our society. So, yes to new technologies and no to hidden models that are in fact some sort of tests on our society. I think it's very relevant for us an opinion that was published in 2018 by Zach Scott in Towards Data Science. I recommend you to read it. In his view, and I agree, our modern digital ecosystem is rapidly organizing itself as a feudal power, a structure that is established in parallel with existing structures and the freedoms that we acquire. In the common conception, feudalism is about a relatively small class, the lords, that uses a variety of subtle and overly political and economical systems to extract value from the daily lives of the producer class, the peasants, who generally have little choice or influence about the system. In modern times, we became used to participating in such platforms, often with only the barest knowledge of the data that we surrender. And that data is then used to generate value exclusively for the platform owners. If you pay enough attention, you will recognize classes from feudalism, but in a digital fashion. The same as in medieval times, the state is in most cases hesitant and is looking on how this system could work for a smooth governance. Not for the best governance, but for a safe one for them. Then who are the lords? Organizations who own and manage these platforms. Who is major genre? Organizations with business models based on these platforms. The minor genres are the influencers, who drive users to spend more time on the platforms. Who are the serfs? People like us and organizations who submit to the data collection for their own right to exist in this digital space. Do you recognize this feudalism model? Look at the content industry for the public, not the scholarly communication. Think of Medium, Facebook, YouTube, etc. They are heavily oriented towards building platforms that track users' behavior and seek to convince them to stay longer, to come back sooner onto these platforms. Similarly, the authors, content creators are incentivized to publish more and to become champions of the dissemination of their own work. Arguably, these incentive systems are built around a public reputation that is supported by a system of metrics very doubtful, like likes, thumbs, comments, hard to be assessed. Generally, this digital content industry is permeable to non-human contributors, algorithms that are able to create content and reactions, not humans. They are vulnerable to anonymity and identity fraud. Have you heard, for example, about click farms and click bots? These are common phenomena associated with living on such platform as they are designed today. Do everything is needed to please the Lord. So it's pertinent to discuss if such signs of track and persuasion and such algorithms are currently present in scholarly communication. Our current work at SKS is exploring the opportunity for conducting robust research about the use of track and persuade technologies in scholarly communication. In a preliminary study that we are about to publish, we collected observations on a sample of 148 relevant websites for scholarly communication. Through this work, we try to identify the essential questions, how much readers, authors, reviewers are tracked when they interact with such websites, what good practices to be recommended for the future research, and finally, whether citizen science is a suitable approach to research in this field. We aim to determine a broader solution for building trust and infrastructure in scholarly communication of the future. We didn't make this study to start allocating blame. We did it to prevent, to recruit the right stakeholders, to keep a proper order on how these technologies are landing in scholarly communication. Also important to say at this stage, our early observations, luckily, or I'm happy to say, suggest that we can use principles of open science to offer guidelines for this work. And this shows again the value of open science. Some short explanations. Artificial intelligence is a term that lacks precision and creates confusion. It can be briefly described as a set of computer programs having the potential to develop engineering and some autonomous processes in manufacturing and services. Digital persuasive technologies are mostly related to content that could be generated, mined, and then used to influence users' behavior. Robotic process automation, RPA, represents models that could help automate business and manufacturing processes. So an ideal combination of these three elements raises the enthusiasm nowadays of investors, governments, and the public for what they say a society in which humans are released for creative tasks and prosperous life, and robots are put on repetitive tasks. By many, this combination is called artificial intelligence. For me, it's evident that this promise is hard to realize within the current knowledge base and cultures that we have, while some critique says that downsides are likely to be ignored. We need more transparency for what's inside of this AI black box. And by the way, did you know that only half of AI could be reproduced with reasonable costs? As said, look beyond the PowerPoint that describes artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence at its best is developed to predict and estimate. The prediction model fueled the business of recommendation engines, and it mainly works with two types of filtering: content-based filtering and collaborative filtering. The content-based filtering means tracking your clicks, your searches, your bookmarks, etc. The collaborative filtering is usually associated with creating accounts on the platform and is about tracking your activities on other platforms and accumulating in that platform. Persuasive technologies rely on this surveillance and ability to create what is called individual psychographic profiles, which means combining the two filters, content-based and collaborative-based. And although a new wave in persuasion technologies has been driven by Apple and Google taking a position against this use of cookies and trackers, it is hard to see this as an improvement. We need to learn more about these new models that were launched in the summer of this year, 2021. Robotic process automation is an old good intention, is not necessarily new, but currently it lacks a deep ethical conversation about the reintegration of individuals in the society of the future. Replacing humans with machines is hard, but doable. I would say in many cases. But integrating humans in society is a much harder job. I would rather concentrate on the later, on this integration of humans. The quantitative study that we did to investigate the frequency of tracking, we analyzed, as I said, 148 web pages of publishers, libraries, and tech companies related to scholarly communication. And we tried to answer 9 questions. Don't think only to the usual suspects, the publishers. No, we balance between them, libraries, and tech companies with products and services for scholarly communication, including some such companies that are started at universities. The answer to our first question, does the website inform you whether it uses cookies, divided our study into disjunctive subsets, because only 94 of web pages out of 148 openly confirmed the use of cookies. 54 of websites kept silent about their cookies, although we accessed them from Europe, where we think we have a strong GDPR, that's General Data Protection Regulation. So we verified the use of cookies to this later data set of 54. We checked them with cookie management applications, and we revealed the presence of cookies in most of them. So we continue with the other questions for the websites that recognize the use of cookies in their applications. So the result highlights surprising observations. 60% of pages have no option to manage cookies. They say we use cookies, but no option to manage these cookies, which is the third question in our survey. Even when the option is present, the accept all button is promoted more visibly than the one that allows to manage the cookies. This is what engineers call dark patterns. Questions 2, 4, and 5, 6, and 8 are translated in a number of simplified answers So in more than 50% of the cases, we discovered that cookies, managing the cookies is far of being intuitive. 50% of those that recognize, not only recognize that have cookies, but also have a button to manage these cookies. So imagine how low we go. And to the 9th questions, from the preliminary, from the original set of 148 web pages, 70% offered the possibility to create user accounts. As said, in psychographic profiling, data collected through user accounts is usually complementary to the data collected through trackers, with the potential of de-anonymization of data set. This is important. So imagine or think of what is the potential of combining the tracking technologies with user accounts. This kind of detail is what we need to learn before we make decisions regarding the coexistence of algorithms and humans in our field of expertise or in scholarly communication. So, is this an early sign for track and persuade in scholarly communication? This is the question that we wanted to at least offer a glance, if not an answer. The data set that we created could be downloaded from the link that you see here, and it's saved on Zenodo, open science compliant data repository. The qualitative study, to understand the subjective experiences of trackers in scholarly communication, we conducted written interviews with 15 experts in the field of scholarly communication. They were selected based on the author's professional network. As I said, we tried to publish a paper. I agree, this cannot be considered a representative sample, it's only 15. But their answers provide an initial insight into the community's perception for these issues. A summary of their answers to 13 questions is represented in this figure, with both an overview of responses and selected quotations from them. The overview chart interprets the answers using 3 values: no, yes, and ambiguous. Ambiguous corresponding to I don't know, rarely, and these kind of answers. This graph confirms that scholars believe they do not have a fair opportunity to give mindful consent for being tracked, and that the ethics of tracking should be discussed more extensively in the academic community. Moreover, their opinions about acceptable and unacceptable purposes of the technologies suggest that more debates could be organized to understand the researchers' willingness. This was one aim of our tiny study, to stimulate the willingness of our colleagues around the world, like you, for looking closer to the problem of these new technologies and to generate proper research. As I said, we were looking for early signs of tracking technologies in our field. It was clear to us that we need to be more anticipative. There's a big mistake to let things happen and then try to correct them. Let's not do that mistake. So, what are the essential questions for the scholarly communication community regarding this use of trackers, persuasive technologies, and then how to protect our data and our existence in these platforms? We realize that the scholarly communication community might be tempted to use trackers and persuasive technologies, maybe to increase the relevance of their journals, books, databases, to attract more eyeballs, or to attract more people to the library portals. We agree some of these technologies may serve the interest of readers, authors, peer reviewers, and some interest of research organizations as well. Others will serve only the interest of platform owners. It's therefore important to identify what questions need answers before these technologies become the norm. We suggested the following questions. What are the highest ethical paths for a field of communication that needs to build trust and communicate evidence and knowledge? What vulnerabilities are brought to the research community? What are the real opportunities for researchers and for the society in that sense? What is realistic and what is utopic in these technologies? Which are the demonstrated positive effects of these technologies, not the promises? How can we ensure that those technologies are developed human-centric? Who is governing the development of these technologies? What system could guard the researchers from being manipulated by such technologies? What is their impact on educating the next generations of curious minds? Also worth to be flagged, open science leads to unprecedented sharing of research data. While generally this is a positive change, it also opens us opportunities for malicious use of technology. Those administrating and using data repositories should be aware of the possibilities for questionable data reuse. What are the risks to the scholarly communication community when probably becoming permeable to trackers and persuasive technologies? Scholarly communication is an essential element of research. Why? It supports rigorous professional conversation between researchers with an independent critical thought at its core. Tracking the researchers' interactions and persuading them to take certain actions will significantly diminish their genuine contributions to society and their critical points of view. Research needs intuition, anticipation, hard work, and design serendipity. Being able to influence these elements in both transparent or a covered manner has the potential to control the course of human progress. We need to avoid such manipulations. This is very important. First of all, tracking and persuasive technologies could change the readership of a journal or a book in a manner completely different than traditional editorial practices. Academic texts, like those in journals, with proper editorial work, editorial work could thrive based on the application of these technologies instead of the quality of the conversation around the text. Second, the surveillance technologies used to build psychographic profiles persuade algorithmically and pass as humans. They pose the risk of influencing our authors' contributions, including their conclusions and recommendations. Even hypothesis generations could be influenced by aforementioned technologies. For years, there has been a quest to automate the identification of hot topics in research. This approach didn't prove beneficial for research diversity and didn't contribute to the development of the next generations of curious minds. As suggested by Royal Society and Alan Turing Institute in 2019, using AI and robotic process automation for hypothesis refinement may represent an effective and efficient solution for researchers, but not before defining what represents ethical use of these technologies. Such systems provide predictions, but no real insights. And these two things, predictions and insights, real insights, are different. What is our group's perspectives on the findings of what we had in our small study, quantitative and qualitative parts. To build such perspective, we compared our findings with the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity. In 2017, ALEA Code says, authors should ensure that their work is made available to colleagues in a timely, open, transparent, and accurate manner, and are honest in their communication to the general public in traditional and social media. The problem, however, is that this is an instruction to the author and not to the third parties like hosts, disseminators, aggregators, and syndication platforms of all kinds. In the section of research misconduct and unacceptable practices, this code identifies as bad practice the establishing of supporting journals that undermine the quality control of research. However, it defines the scope of this best practice as simple as predatory journals. The ALEA Code certainly attempts to bring within scope many areas of open science, but treats these subjects as issues pertaining to the author. This is an omission, a dangerous one, because many users trust scholarly communication platforms without further questions. And nowadays they trust not only journals, established journals with peer review, but also preprint servers. And preprint servers are now very often quoted or referred to in journals, magazines, newspapers that are posed to the broader society. Standards that are expected by this ALEA Code to researchers do not explicitly cover publishers, preprint servers, aggregators, hosters of all kinds, and disseminators of knowledge research. And we ask ourselves again, do we need serious research and effective policy making in this area? My answer is obvious, and we put an effort on our small company to demonstrate this. Not alone, but together with representatives from 3 major European universities. What we did is not a research project. It is a call for action. Researchers, policymakers, and service design companies should come together and work in this integration of these technologies. The importance of research, doing research about tracking and persuasion technologies in scholarly communication. Those we interviewed were interested to learn more about tracking and persuasive technologies, these 15 interviews. For that, proper, well-resourced research is needed. Our study is not enough. This research needs to identify the actual use of those technologies, to anticipate their potential use, but also to determine which are the best approaches to engage with the scholarly communication stakeholders. Early engagement is essential for steering a community in a smooth manner towards ethical developments. As I mentioned before, we didn't do all this effort to find scapegoats and to allocate blame and suspicion. We did it to call for a bigger partnership and to start tackling these early signs before they become a problem. The low number of expert opinions and the answers we received is another reasonable indicator that we are acting at the frontier of human knowledge. We try to reach more experts. Only 15 were able to give us answers. These technologies are largely unknown, and this was a reason why we couldn't interview more experts. We believe that in-depth research in this area would support practical implementations for open science. Such new understanding is key for at least 2 pillars of the new culture, which is called open science: the future of scholarly communication and research integrity. We also believe that this is the best time to start such research. In addition, an advocacy and engagement program is needed to connect stakeholders and to agree on path forwards. And this program is better to start now. In my view, the solution will be less about mandates. It will be about creating trust, encouraging transparency, and building consensus. So what are our recommendations for the scholarly communication community? Both open science and scholarly communication communities, there is overlap, but they are not the same, need to widen their remit to include guidance and best practice on the use of tracking and persuading technologies. Research integrity codes such as ALEA need significant revision to embrace these new areas. Researchers need to be aware of the dangers associated with cookies or trackers. Our study paints a concerning picture. There is little transparency and significant potential for persuasive technologies to become commonplace. There is a need for education to enable researchers to understand the actual model of dissemination, syndication, submission, peer review platforms, but also for the use of their social media. Research funders, university publishers, and tech companies should consider co-creating ethical environments for such platforms. There is also need to build a global advocacy and awareness campaign to open up these issues around the use of modern technologies, highlighting the dangers, but also the benefits. This will help reshape the culture of both national and at both national and international levels. Last but not least, our research data collection protocol was designed to use citizen scientists, volunteers, alongside researchers' efforts. We also created short training materials to improve data collection. Very short, as the international community recommends this kind of training. To attain scale, diversity, geographic penetration for a full study, a robust research, we think citizen science is a recommended and suitable approach for work in this area. Finally, this study is teamwork. Here are the people behind this initial work. I am very grateful for them accepting to give their time and expertise, and also all together to build anticipatory a position paper, which I hope will be published soon. This wasn't paid research. We all did it on our volunteer time. Each of them has a different expertise, but together we felt that we were doing merry work. So thank you once again. So these are the colleagues. I'm not going to introduce myself again. It was in our team also Dr. Paul Aries, the Vice Provost of UCL Libraries and UCL Office for Open Science and Scholarly Communication. You might know Paul very well. Beatrice Gini is Dr. Beatrice Gini is the training coordinator at the Office of Scholarly Communication within Cambridge University Libraries. Her work centers around supporting researchers in acquiring skills they need to navigate the scholarly communication landscape. Professor Olga Stepankova graduated logistics from the Faculty of Mathematics and Physics at Charles University. In 1998, she was awarded the title of full professor of technical cybernetics at Czech Technical University in Prague. Damla Bal from Scientific Knowledge Services is a PhD student in business and management at Corvinus University in Budapest. Jordanka Dejanova, also from Scientific Knowledge Services. Her previous professional experience is built in over 20 years in the academic libraries. Denis Özdemir from the same Czech Technical University in Prague is an OSCP certified ethical hacker, white hat, specialized in network and web application penetration testing and system hacking. In conclusion, be very careful to this surveillance economy, which is the business model of digital feudalism. Allowing ourselves to be surveyed by these organizations in exchange for free or underpriced services, what we do, we develop a new culture in which our society is trading hard-won freedom for questionable prosperity. That culture will be inherited by future generations, who will be challenged to change it when this trade-off is no longer bearable. Look back and see for which reasons Tim Berners-Lee proposed the invention of World Wide Web, which is the interface through which internet meets people. It was supposed to be a system that manages information, not a system that manipulates and influences what information to create. This is one big foundation of what we call a knowledge-based society. Think of what do we want now? What kind of internet we want to have? Now think again to know what knowledge-based society means if the internet is not the same as we used to know when most people decided that a knowledge-based society is a good idea, because that time internet was different. Open science is part of this knowledge-based society. From the beginning it was. But it's up to us to decide what kind of such knowledge-based society we want to build. It is said that web trackers enable financially sustainable web-based application, including those that predict and interfere with the behavior of our society. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, publications like Medium. Some tech companies consider these trackers fundamental for the free and open internet as we know it. I disagree. I consider this as an inappropriate model for scholarly communication. While allowing ourselves to be surveyed by these organizations, we exchange freedom to this, what is considered a sort of prosperity. This is not the right trade. This is a questionable prosperity. Making free WhatsApp calls could be thought that, yes, I can do it instead of paying from my own pocket, but this trade is more than what we think it is. And as I said, this new culture will be inherited by the new generations. Think, do you really want to pass this culture to the next generations? He wove the World Wide Web and created a mass medium for the 21st century. The World Wide Web is indeed Berners-Lee creations alone. He designed it. He loosed it into the world. And he, more than anyone else, has fought to keep it open, non-proprietary, and free. This is what Times Magazine wrote 22 years ago when Google and similar companies were just starting their journey. The internet now is no longer that internet. Is still this non-proprietary, free internet, open internet, true for what we have now? Did all these platforms, algorithms, and artificial intelligence work for the benefit of our society? If the answer is no, make sure they are no longer going to create the fashion and the way we are going to develop scholarly communication. Finally, these are my contact details. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. You can find us also in the EOS marketplace. I'm not sure if this is available in on other continents. And I'm now looking forward for questions from the audience. Please feel encouraged to address these questions in English or Spanish or Portuguese. Thank you once again, and I'm looking forward for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tiberius. Very interesting. And I think for myself and probably for many people, perhaps an unfamiliar topic. So it's really interesting to hear about this. Unfamiliar, not in the sense that we don't know that it exists, because I think we kind of all know that it exists, these trackers. But probably the issue is that we kind of accept their existence, right? And we kind of accept this reality. So what can we do there to become more familiar with these topics, and to learn about it, so that we can perhaps be more active player in this whole field?
Well, I think it's important to have these different perspectives, two perspectives. One is this industry, because this is an industry of these trackers and these applications. I don't want to say that this shouldn't develop, this industry. Not of trackers, of artificial intelligence, as although the definition is unclear and so on. But not in a wild way as it developed in the internet, the general public internet. So this is one perspective. For me, what helped, it was to read a lot. So I have I can share this. I have a very nice reading list of articles that are relevant. And I was also hearing, I was also watching public hearings from these companies, and for even recently public hearings of executives from these companies unveiling what is the process inside. Not all companies should be treated the same. Some of them are more ethical than others. The other perspective is for scholarly communication industry. And this is much harder, because this is a narrow topic. Not so many people are looking into this and then make the findings available. This is what we are trying to do with this paper, which I hope will pass the peer review. And we will publish, and hopefully we'll give more, not only talks, but we'll interact more based on that paper. It is important to read, and this is taking time to read these cookie policies. If I was in a submission system for a publishing house, they have one submission system for a number of journals, and I read the cookies. I was asked to create an account in order to submit and to interact with reviewers. I created that account. I looked into the policies, and I saw some interesting things. That by creating the account, I give them the permission to exchange the data from that account with third parties. I wasn't happy with that. I created my account in order to be able to submit, but I didn't create my account to put some data that is then shared with, I don't know, Meta from Facebook. Let me decide if I want to interact with Meta from Facebook, or I don't know, maybe with an online shop. Let myself be the one that decides to interact with this. So in scholarly communication, it's harder to penetrate. It is necessary to have a dialogue. And in equal terms, we should not start a dialogue by blaming, for example, research organizations that are creating research ideas. This is, by the way, one of the worst conditions with these trackers. I met not as a publisher, but at an organization which is almost a public organization, perceived as a public organization for research IDs. And I have such a research ID. I was not aware. I read the terms, it came to me as a complete surprise. So engage with them. I am sure that probably the governing board of such organization is not aware about this policy, and is most likely because probably they don't own the technology, and they implemented from a tech company with the terms and conditions of this company. So I'm sure if we engage with that board, we will meet reasonable people, responsible people, and they will change these terms. This kind is not advice. It could be barely called recommendation. This is what I think it helps: to read, to be careful, and to engage.
Okay, thank you so much. My next question then is ethical algorithmic persuasion possible?
Well, I had this question. I gave this presentation, a presentation then that inspired my work in this. I gave a presentation to Cambridge University, and it was someone from the audience saying that, look, persuading someone to take the pills, the medicine is good because the person will take the pills. So it could be called, but look, such a system of reminders rather than persuasive algorithm shouldn't be called persuasive algorithm. It could be ethical. I hardly imagine, but I think it could be ethical if it's discussed, agreed a lot, and if this, what is called the black box of AI, is transparent. I know a startup from University of Turin, which is called, well, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say the name, and they are actually building software to make this black box transparent. And this is something very important for making this persuasion ethically acceptable. It could be, if we think of it in terms of reminders, but if a system that is agreed. But if we think of this addictive algorithms as robots that are able to work night and day, that are able to combine information about us more than even we know about us, and not only information about us, but about our environment, and to connect that information with us, then this is at a completely different scale than what humans could build to protect themselves. This is not fair, simply not fair. We humans are used to be persuaded, and we are persuaded for thousands of years. But we are persuaded by other humans, and we developed a technique to respond to that persuasion. This persuasion from robots, from algorithms, is new for us. We didn't have time to develop a barrier for this persuasion. So it's completely unfair. So this border of ethical, unethical, it's so thin, it's so hard to be identified, that I'm almost inclined to say, with the culture we have now, with the information we have now, is not possible to build this ethical persuasion. We should be very careful. So I'm not going to 100% no, I'm going close to that.
Okay, thank you so much, Tiberius. Claudia.
Thank you, Tiberius.
Thank you.
How we can do that engagement you mentioned of all the stakeholders to co-create that ethical set of principles, and where this discussion should be taking place and who should lead it?
Well, hard to say who should lead it, but as I said, this is not a proper behavior, using and trying to penetrate, to intrude, better to say, the human life with this algorithm. This is not something characteristic only for businesses, although we have these forefront examples of Facebook and that play out. If we look careful, we see that some governments enjoy themselves with these new tools. So if we are inclined to say that this discussion should be led by governments, we should actually go into the wolf mouth. I think the best is to have a good mix where society is at broad is well represented. For us in scholarly communication, I think it's important to engage funders, to engage publishers of all kinds, learned societies, university presses, these mega journals like PLOS, commercial publishers, all, not to be exclusive. And then researchers, starting maybe with some of those that lead, that manage PhD schools, because it is a lot of writing education, how the faculty writes education in PhD schools, senior researchers as well. It is important when we discuss when we say publishers, it is important to reach the editors that could wear two hats of a publisher and as a researcher. And there are, of course, this is the common characteristic to many editors. And then to see what are the intentions. Why? Because in this scholarly communication, it is very tempting to say, what are you doing? You are doing a journal, right? What are you, a university press or a commercial publisher, whatever? You are doing a journal. I am coming with a solution to you. I am coming with a solution which is bringing more eyeballs to your journal. What is going to do that? It will increase your readership. It will increase your impact. It will make your journal more relevant. You can go and say to authors, please write to our journals because so much more people will read. It is important to ask if such situation occurs, how? In which technology? What kind of techniques are you going to use to bring these more eyeballs, as you said? How? And then you discover if this is an honest approach, at least you have a sense, not necessarily to fully discover, or this is something which is intransparent work, something that is a secret receipt, something that you don't want. You don't want any kind of readership. You want the one that is relevant for that field, because scholarly communication is a place where we confront ideas. This is why Henry Oldenburg invented 600 years ago peer review system, because we confront ideas with our peers. So it's not important whatever eyeballs we have. And then this is one thing. The other thing is we have preprints, and we publish is open for everyone. Many of publications in preprints are CC BY, not CC BY ND, which is non-derivatives. CC BY. And here comes, this is something that most likely will not come to you. This is something that will remain completely separate, like a curtain between you and this. And here comes an organization, a company, whatever, a bunch of engineers, some hackers, making a software, finding your text, CC BY, not CC BY ND, so perfectly legal. They take your text, they combine this text, because this is what algorithms could do today. It's not for the future. They can do it today, and I'll explain. And combine this and create not evidence, not something that is backed by a scientific method. They create something which is called sophism. Something that looks nice, it is fluent, looks like it is a text written by a scientist, has an expert opinion built in it, and then is posed to the general population to create misinformation, disinformation, to say, look what scientists are saying about vaccine, look that maybe the earth is flat because scientists are saying, look at this text. And this is something that is not coming to you. This is something that should be identified. This is most probably circulated in places that you never go, in communities on Facebook and other social media that you never go because you are not that profile. And this is something that we should anticipate, understand how it works, and limit. Try to create a limit for that. And very briefly about this text, about which is written by robots, not by humans. When Trump was candidated for his first mandate, I think that was 16. 60% of the tweets and retweets and conversations were identified by being, I can give the study, by being written by robots, not by people. They could be identified. One characteristic of that is that actually these texts are usually very accurate in grammar and quite long. This is roughly two characteristics of this test: quite long and the proper grammar. That was 2016. When he candidated again for the second mandate in this, well, last year he started, Twitter, well, sorry, not Twitter, the same research team couldn't identify the same level of robot creation, the same 60%. It was much lower. The problem, and the research team said the problem is that we couldn't say at the end of our research if this low percentage, decreasing percentage, is low because they simply stopped or Twitter find a way to stop them, or because we or Twitter could no longer identify these robots and their text. They could no longer distinguish between them and the human text. So think about this. It is a lot of innovation in how these robots are able to create texts and appearances that pass as humans. I can share you more about that. It was even a demonstration of IBM's Watson, one of the most advanced robots. Of course, it is all fine with Watson and the work they were doing there. They demonstrated that they were defeating a team of debaters, human debaters, with a robot. The robot was able to combine text in a way that debated better than humans. Imagine that.
Wow. Very interesting, Tiberius. Another question is what is the impact, or would be the impact of that technology over the educational environment? I mean, in the regular educational environment, not necessarily academic.
Well, I think became regular for parallel education for people. We have now a number of platforms where you can go and take courses. I know cases of companies paying millions for their employees to be able to take further education, not to universities, but in these platforms. I think having platforms of alternative education is not a bad idea. I think it's good to pose options to the population to further education. Let's have the general population have as much further education as possible. It comes, though, the question, what kind of education? Because the title of a course could be very catchy, could be very inviting. Okay, this is a course, it costs $19.99 and is going to teach me German, or is going to teach me C++ programming. The quality of this course is very important, and the ethics. I booked such a course. This is one example. This is not a generalization. And it was a language course. And I was in that course invited by the teacher. And I think it wasn't by intention, but look, this is how it happened. Because she wasn't probably educated with proper pedagogical studies. I was invited to listen to more text in that language from a band, a musical band. And that musical band was a favorite band for white supremacy. This is less likely to happen in proper education where we have people educated in pedagogical classes. So what is the danger with these algorithms and this persuasion? First of all, to start, you have such a teacher paying for an algorithm to create the attractiveness to this course. How is that algorithm? Is not going to send you an email inviting you there to that course. It's going to pop up in your recommendation bars in YouTube. Is going to use all sorts of tracking from WhatsApp or something else, keywords that you use to combine with other information about you. One of the most dangerous combination is with the fears. When we, for example, start searching, I don't know, for a kind of disease to someone close to us or an injury or something like this, machines identify this is a fear for this individual. And if we are able to play that chord, that individual is more likely to pay attention to our advertising, to our invitation, and so on, because it thinks it could help solving his or her problem. So these algorithms could be designed in a such complex way that create more attraction to a course or another. Again, it's good. Let's have as many courses available to people as possible, to as affordable price as possible. But this environment of algorithmic persuasion should allow people to make their own choices, not to manipulate them.
Thank you, Tiberius. Walter, your turn.
Yes, I think most of us know GDPR, which is a framework, a legal framework for data protection, privacy. Yes. European, but has been widely adopted, I mean, all over the world. My question is, do we need GDPR for scholarly communication?
Well, I think GDPR is very much abused. If you look to you have this consent for, as I said, we accessed a lot of web pages from Europe, and a number of them, by our surprise, didn't display choices for cookies. But let's assume you are in good hands, and then you access this. You don't press accept all, and then you go to manage cookies. And then you have let's say, a sort of interaction that pretends to be GDPR compliant. And if you look to cookies, you see most of them off by default. You think I'm in safe hands. Then you see a little button somewhere saying legitimate interest. You press that legitimate interest, and you see all these trackers and all these cookies turn on by default under legitimate interest. What does it mean? It means that that organization, the web page that you visited, she or he, that organization has a right, a legitimate interest to collect trackers from you. So it's not about your choice to allow these trackers, but it is about their legitimate interest to track you. If we wouldn't have this case, if GDPR is not, it wouldn't become a place which is so easy, or a framework which is so easily to be abused, I think GDPR would be enough. So we won't need a GDPR specifics for scholarly communication. But when we have that framework, so much cheated, so much abused, and nothing as a reaction for that abuse, then I think we need to take the destiny in our own hands.
Okay, thank you so much. And then one last question. You mentioned digital feudalism. What can libraries or information professionals do to make artificial intelligence and technology more democratic?
Interesting question. So I think this is something that for me is a bit hard to say. I think there is a need for more initiative. I see libraries very powerful. I see them actually as one of the most powerful. I put it as an invisible hand. I call it, as a concept is from economics, one of the most powerful drive for open science. And libraries, in my opinion, are very, when they are united, very powerful. Why? Because they are a large network of organizations working with similar standards, spread across the globe, knowing very well about common topics, and organized in all sorts of organizations, federations that could care their own interest. But the key is when they are united on a topic. So in this topic of aggregating content, of syndicating content, I don't think libraries are very active, technology-based. They are consumers. They are good in offering tools to patrons, but technology-based, leading on technology development, I think libraries could do so much more. So this digital feudalism is something that could be turned back into, let's say, democracy, or developed into democracy, if we stop or we discourage having a handful of lords controlling the data for others. First, not to give the data. Second, to have a counterpart, something developed with the support of libraries to be more present in the governance of such aggregation, dissemination, syndication platforms. Also, libraries and universities combined to be more present in the area of preprint servers, to understand the problems, the shortcomings, and to address them, to see the problem of researchers, of publishing in preprint and curating the preprint servers, and to address this. I understand that some libraries might say, oh, it's another big task on our shoulders, and we can't bear with so many tasks. They are right. Libraries are quickly turned to be under-resourced, because they started to spread in so many topics. They are right to be in so many topics, because there is a lack of, I would say, funders' initiative to find the right bodies to step in, but they need more resources, the libraries. So asking for more resources, defining a strategy, prioritizing this is what libraries could do, understanding how big this problem is, and not in the next 10 years, maybe to allow 2-3 years, not more, to understand how big is this problem, engaging by now, even without resources, even without doing much, engaging with the owners of such platforms, and understanding, not from a combat position, understanding what they are doing in this area and what is their willingness to work in a set of principles that are acceptable for libraries and their communities. This is something without resources. And then when more resources are coming, maybe to become actors in developing these technologies.
Right. Thank you so much, Tiberius.
Humble opinion, Wouter. I don't want to say that it should be characterized more than a humble opinion.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. And thank you so much. It's very, very valuable to share your ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time,
Thank you.
Tiberius, for sharing this experience that you have with us. As we mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, and sorry for the technical glitches that we had, we will share the video in full through our usual networks. We will also share your presentation. I think it would be really interesting, you mentioned it in your presentation, if you have a short list of readings, some essential readings on the topic. I think that would be really useful for the audience, because just like for me, as probably for many people, it's a very new and perhaps unfamiliar topic. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
So thank you so much to our colleagues, Claudia Vilches, Tamara Brathwaite, Marlene Salinas, John also from STIC, and other colleagues who, as always, assist us with organizing these webinars, this series of webinars. I think with that, we can close this session. Thanks again for your generosity in sharing your experiences, and we will be in touch. I'm sure our audience enjoyed very much your presentation.
Thank you, and congratulations for the whole series. Sorry.
No, don't worry. Thank you to you.
Thank you. Have a nice rest of the day.
Yes, you too.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.